the New Zealand Tech Podcast, brought to you by Gorilla Technology, proactive and strategic IT.
Hey folks, greetings and welcome along to the New Zealand Tech Podcast. I'm your host, Paul Spain, and great to have Craig Young here. How are you, Craig?
Oh, well, it's great to be actually in the studio, Paul, after several years of not being able to get together. So good to be here.
It's great. Thanks for making the effort to come across and join me in Podcast New Zealand studios. And it's nice to see the studio starting to get booked out and used a little bit more. We've been doing a lot of remote podcast recording and streaming for different organisations and our own podcasts. But it's very nice to actually get to connect in person.
Yeah,
again. So,
there's something good about being in the same space, talking.
Yep. Yeah. Now maybe you can just remind listeners where you fit into this big wide world of tech in New Zealand.
Yeah, so I'm the CEO of TUANZ, which is the Technology Users Association, and I suppose it's the easiest way to put it is we're the group helping the users or the members of our association sort of make sense of what's coming down the track, the digital future, through sharing experiences and knowledge with them, but then we're also the independent and representative voice for users, particularly with government and media when it comes to technology and connectivity. And connectivity is our history, so we've still got a big part to play in that space. So that's really who we are. Yeah, the users. We're a users group.
Love it.
Yeah.
Love it. Oh, it's great, and it's great to see the organisation TUANZ has really it's such a long history, but continues to contribute and play a valuable role in New Zealand. And I think technology is so important to our success as a nation, and so your representation there of technology users is very important.
Thanks, Paul. We actually we clicked over 35 years just a couple of weeks ago, which in terms of some associations is not very long, but when you think of technology and digital stuff, it's pretty good. And we've come a long way in those 35 years. I mean, I think we've still got a wee way to go, but it's a great space to be in.
Yeah. Oh, that's exciting. Well, before we jump in, big thank you to our show partners, Vocus, Vodafone, Spark, HP, and Gorilla Technology for their support. Now, a bunch of things that we wanted to get into today. Elon Musk and Twitter, big in the news. In fact, I did an interview earlier for TVNZ, so you probably get about 1.5 seconds of me on the 6 o'clock news tonight. But I guess there's some questions there. Can we trust Elon? Is probably the biggest question that I'd like to delve into a little bit. There's also been some sort of dramas when it comes to the world of streaming technology, which has been so disruptive and such a big change. And there's been the big global players and then the local players, but some fascinating things I think going on there. CNN that launched a service and then within the same month decided to kill it off. Netflix losing users, and then where do our local services, Sky and TVNZ on Demand 3 now fit, and a few other topics. So we may as well jump straight in. The first topic is related to New Zealand's scientists doing research around volcanoes, and of course, we had the incredibly tragic situation with the White Island, and the eruption there, and the loss of lives, and this still seems to be an ongoing global issue that we have not really had the sort of level of warning that would successfully solve these issues to date. But the reports we're seeing are suggesting that New Zealand research here, and this is being looked at globally, might well be the system that or the innovation that allows 1 or 2 days prior warning of volcanic eruptions. And I guess when you step back and you look at the sort of data that can be gathered today in incredibly granular detail, if there is any way of predicting this stuff, you would think with some analysis and some artificial intelligence, sort of machine learning, that this could be solved. How confident would you feel, based on the bits and pieces that you've read on this? Does this seem like a pipe dream or something that we can do?
I have done a bit of reading on this, and I am thinking that there's something in here. I have to admit, I've just drove past Mount Ruapehu on Saturday. It's a brooding giant, really, isn't it? Sitting there, and it's there's very little snow on it at the moment, so it's looking very Mount Doomish, I suppose you might put it. Yeah. And I don't know if you've read, but scientists are saying that the pressure does appear to be building up in Ruapehu, and that there could be something there. And so, we're a perfect environment to do these sort of tests. I mean, we've already got the Google, trialing in New Zealand, the earthquake warning system, across cell phones. So, why can't we use the elements of technology we've got to find it? And I see that scientists are looking at, that even up to 3 weeks beforehand, they'll be able to sort of figure out that something's happening just through the frequencies of vibrations and things that are occurring inside a mountain.
I can feel those vibes.
Fascinating, isn't it? Yeah.
An earthquake's coming, a volcano eruption's coming.
Animals are running away and things like that. Yeah, but actually to be given a couple of days warning to know that something serious is going to happen is, 2 days, 2 more days of being able to save lives than you might have otherwise had. So, and New Zealand, we are right on those plates, and we've got a number of active volcanoes. So I think it's definitely something that I think we'll lead the world in. I mean, it comes back to, we're sitting in Auckland, which is a number of not extinct volcanoes.
Don't remind me, Craig.
That's right. They're slumbering any moment. They're slumbering quietly. You might be living in Wellington thinking you're going to have an earthquake, but in Auckland is going to be the volcano spot. So.
If this episode doesn't finish,
that's right. You'll know what happens.
The AI let us down.
That's right.
Yeah. Look, it's really incredible if you think about over the last 100, maybe a bit more years, how human life expectancy has increased for all sorts of, basically a whole range of innovations on the medical front, and especially, but just there's been constant innovation, and we see that focus in vehicle technologies that are making vehicles safer. Some of the stuff is it's pretty simple, right? Seatbelts. That's a good idea. ABS braking, but it just keeps going, and this becomes another area that it probably doesn't necessarily make a noticeable difference in terms of overall, because not many people are dying from volcanic eruptions, but in terms of the individuals that are impacted and the families that are impacted, we don't ever want to see a repeat of some of those past situations, and the chance to be able to get out of Dodge before an eruption happens. We can use technology to do it. Boy, that's really cool.
Yep, sure is.
Yeah. So no, I'm from what I've read on it, and the number of volcanoes we've got in New Zealand, but of course this data can be gathered globally, right? So again, doesn't probably matter too much where in the world you are, but having the smart thinking and the innovative approach that seems to be coming out of New Zealand at the moment through these researchers at University of Canterbury. That brings a bit of warning and saves some lives. Brilliant.
Yeah, absolutely. And another place that we could carve out a niche for New Zealand technology.
Yeah, and look, when you apply technology to one field, sometimes there are good surprises in terms of other ways in which that technology might
Yeah.
get leveraged as well too.
Yep.
Yeah. Now, I saw some news last week around electric sea gliders,
I saw this as well.
and
I thought it was something out of Russian science fiction, actually.
just a shock. It seemed to come out of the blue. Now, if you follow this stuff closely, you might have been aware of it for a while. US startup Region has been working on these sea gliders, and what we've got is a New Zealand outfit called Ocean Flyer, and they've already dropped in $1 million deposit on a $700 million order for 25 of these these ocean flyers, and the idea is to have a fleet of 25 ocean flyers operating by 2028 and kicking off in just about 3 years' time. And the concept is a vessel that can carry, I think we're talking around 100 people, that can get from one ocean port to another. So you could, presumably, that covers a fair bit of journeys within New Zealand. Very efficient, and I think we're talking 100% electric. So yeah, ticks a whole lot of boxes if the technology is safe and stable. If it's not, and you hit the ocean going 500 k's an hour in a nosedive or something, that wouldn't be ideal. But I think that the revolutions are in it being electric, so you're really just changing the carbon footprint right there. And the pace, they're talking Wellington to Littleton in an hour, $60 a seat.
Yeah.
So
And that's
pretty cool alternative to traditional airplanes, right?
Well, I'm not sure I'd want to be doing that in a howling southerly coming up the coast.
Come on, live dangerously, Craig.
It does talk about, when you look at it, it's using very smart technology to keep the glider at a certain height above the waves. And I'm just thinking, does that mean it's skimming across the waves, or is it dipping up and down, or how's it going? I presume, the technology will be such that I read that, for example, it won't be able to go across the Cook Strait when it's rough. But it's going to be about the same as the ferries. So if a ferry can't go, the sea glider can't go. So it's sort of basically around that line. I do understand the Wellington to Littleton one, but the Wellington to Auckland one might take a little bit longer because there's a bit in the way to get up there. What gets me about this is that this technology has been around for quite a while. The idea of skimming across the waves, the aerodynamic efficiency you get by getting lift off the sea is what they're banking on. What is being applied now is the AI and the smart technology to actually fly the aircraft to make the most of it. So, I could see that sort of technology as it comes in, AI and those sort of machine learning being applied back into technology that's been around for a while that we really haven't been able to leverage. So here's another example of where the basic of the ideas have been around, but now we've got the grunt to be able to make it work. So fascinating to see if it works. I'm pretty keen on aeroplanes, but I'd like to try it out on a calm day.
Yeah. And get this potentially crosses in to, well, there's probably some crossovers in terms of our learnings with Wisk, who have been testing the autonomous air taxi type technology in the South Island. And one of the things that we've seen there, and now Boeing, has put a huge investment into that. They do seem to be scaling Whisk now, globally. The footprint in New Zealand, doing the R&D and testing that's happening in New Zealand, is now a fairly small-ish percentage, because they really seem to be getting quite serious about going to market. But it has taken them many years to get to this point. So I'm I guess I'm learning to be a little bit cautious around some of the predictions of how quickly these things will happen, and get ticked off from a perspective of being safe and so on. But I guess I would be hopeful that New Zealand could be one of the locations where the R&D can happen, where this technology can be tested, and it would seem like we're probably a reasonably good place, looking at Whisk and others in the aerospace field, that have found New Zealand as an ideal place to operate, the right sort of balance of safety and government regulation, and a government that seems to encourage this type of research and development. So let's hope we can be more than just a customer for this tech.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Well, our country lends itself to this quite nicely, because we're long and narrow with lots of sea around it. So, it's this technology would be much more applicable to someone like us than it might be to a France or a Germany or even a USA, given how large they are as a land base. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, I want to talk about streaming, and this is a topic that we've spoken about on the New Zealand Tech podcast since the very, very early days. And if I look back to sort of 2011 or so, when we started, Netflix was very much in its infancy, but there was that real interest in what's going to happen. How's this type of technology going to change how we're entertained, how we're informed, and we've seen a huge amount of change. At that point, the only way to get Netflix was with a VPN or some sort of proxy service, and now it's well and truly embedded as one of the main sources of entertainment here in New Zealand. And we've seen all sorts of others players coming along. Spark they had their go on with the Lightbox product, which was something of a Netflix competitor. That was sold to Sky and has been merged in with their Neon service, which that combined service seems to be pretty good. We've got Spark Sport. We've now got Sky being probably a lot more competitive in terms of their overall streaming options. But it seemed to be pretty big news last week that late last week that Netflix had actually lost 200,000 subscribers. And this really caused their share price to take an immediate and direct drop. Now, I don't know, how you weigh these things up. But what I have noticed recently, and we saw a similar thing with Facebook, when suddenly Facebook wasn't growing. Actually, if you've been following the numbers for a while, you would have been aware that they were coming to probably coming to this point, and even if they weren't, is because they were turning a few knobs just to edge slightly above it. And what I think what we see with the technology world is there's so much data that there is that option to be able to adjust and tune. And look, we know Netflix put their prices up. So is this a big? Do you think this is a big surprise? I mean, it's a huge hit in terms of the financial hit for shareholders, isn't it?
Look, I do think it is a bit of a surprise. You can look at it and think, well, surely the numbers are going to stop somewhere along the way. It's the first quarter in 10 years where they've gone backwards. Every quarter since they started 10 years ago, their numbers have grown. And, when you look around the stats, and I'm not sure about New Zealand, but certainly globally, they're at least half of the streaming market in the world. So they're a big, big player. What did they spend last year on content? $13 billion to try and drive people to use their service. I think the reason why the stock went down was that Netflix had actually been estimating they would gain customers in the first quarter of the year. So they thought they might put on about 25% or something. They had some bizarre, really high number. They thought it can't have been 25%, but a number of customers are going to, and they went backwards. And look, they're blaming a number of things. They're blaming not blaming, but they're saying that the war in the Ukraine is leading to effects on their numbers. I think also they're facing significant challenges from other streaming platforms.
That's probably the biggest thing, isn't it?
I think so.
Is that there is very strong competition.
Yeah. What do you think about Prime Video? That's at least 10% of the market, I would suggest. Disney Plus, they've taken all the Marvel Universe movies out of Netflix and put them on their platform. So you've got that huge draw card. I mean, that's where Star Wars is. And I'm a huge Star Wars fan, so not giving up Disney Plus anytime quickly.
There you go.
Apple TV, small, but, spending quite a lot of money on their content. And Apple can afford to, take a long play on that particular service. So the other thing that I was thinking about is that Netflix is suggesting is the password sharing. So I'm a parent of adult kids. I'm not saying that this is happening in our place, but what they're suggesting is that, when your kids are teenagers, they get access to your service because they're in your household. And then when they move out, maybe they go to university, maybe they go flatting, something, you forget to change the password. You forget.
It's a pretty normal scenario, isn't it?
So
you're there are variations on that, right? So at one end of the extreme, we've got straight illegal downloads. The other end of this thing, you've got everybody paying for everything, and then you've got some in between levels, which, to be fair, Netflix have probably encouraged to a big degree, allowing different profiles, not taking any note where people are logging in from. People can log in from multiple countries and access the service and access quite different content, different parts of the world even. No, it's never been a problem.
Well, it's going to come back. I think what they're going to do, and this is where your data and technology stuff comes back. They are trialing in different parts of the world, and it looks like they're going to start doing it globally to try it, where you will be able to have sub profiles on your account. So you might pay a couple of extra dollars for somebody to have access to your Netflix account, but not be in the house. So rather than losing that revenue altogether, finding another way around. And there was some particular write-up that I was looking at too, suggesting that Netflix will start looking at the IP addresses of where people are logging in from. And so we'll start to say, hang on, that IP address doesn't belong to that address. So, maybe we're going to cut it off. Well, that's going down quite a slippery slope. It is going back to, remember those early days with services in New Zealand, which would mask your, you'd pay up front, and it was a VPN, and it would mask your location, and that ran foul of quite a few things. But I can see it.
Global mode.
Global mode. That's it.
We do need to get an episode done on that, and with the founder of Global Mode, because it was very, very interesting.
It was,
and they ended up coming under a fair bit of pressure, and so did the internet providers that used their services, and ultimately it disappeared. But that type of technology still operates to this day.
Yeah,
doesn't it?
well, there's still adverts for VPNs, and I've listened to a podcast yesterday out of the States talking about VPNs giving around security and looking after your personal data online, but they still made the mention of, and you can watch the BBC in the UK at the same time, which is not really what the BBC want you to do, for example.
And it is worth mentioning that some of these sorts of services probably do exactly the opposite of what you might expect. So you're thinking, oh, this is going to help me security wise. Well, who's running this VPN, and are they actually keeping a record of what's flowing across their network? And in some cases, so it's not necessarily all good, and especially if you're buying a security or a service that you think will help
That's
you
right.
from a security or data privacy perspective, and you're buying based on price.
And look, a lot of what's available around the world is becoming available in New Zealand. And look, the classic example for me at the moment, and I'll make this about me, is because I'm a sci-fi freak fan. Star Trek Discovery was on Netflix. They took it off in the States, CBS, they put it on to Paramount Plus, never launched in New Zealand. TVNZ have picked up the rights. So you can go to TVNZ on demand. It's free. The entire series 3, which is the one that wasn't available on Netflix, is now available to binge watch on TVNZ on demand. So, there are these New Zealand services that are, making access to some of this content as well. I think the big question around numbers, for example, is also, I think we're going to see this, the future being where people dip in and out of services because
I
of the
think that's
number
already happening,
expanding.
isn't it?
And if I think about how many services we have in our house, I keep saying to myself, I need to sit down and figure out how many I'm actually subscribing to, because I'm probably very much like other people where they've gone, I want to watch that program, so I sign up for that service, and then I don't cancel it, and we start watching other things. So I think it's time to review.
Yeah, I've found subscribing to some of these services through, in my case, a subscription through Apple subscriptions, and putting aside the cut that Apple might take, because it's maybe, well, it doesn't feel like it's directly impacting me, but they must work that out behind the scenes, and it's not necessarily a great equation, but the simplicity of being able to go and see what I'm subscribed to just from my mobile device, and that one place that has a whole pile of things, I find is actually really good. I think there's a plus side in that, and you can go through. I was looking over the last few days. It's like, oh yeah, that's right. I signed up for whatever. Oh, there was something on Apple TV I wanted to watch. Actually, quite a good watch. It's not quite tech, but it's quite closely related in terms of startups. Is the what's it called? We crashed.
Oh, right.
And absolutely fascinating watch. It's available in a podcast that had come out prior, and it's all about the WeWork story and the founders, and definitely there's a lot of cross into the tech type world, because it was a very sort of disruptive type of play as a business. But fascinating watch. But that, I hadn't been subscribed to Apple TV for the last little while, and when I jumped in, I thought, oh yeah, I'll watch that. I realized you could actually sign up for a 7-day trial, and actually that's enough to see to see the series. There was something I was looking for my son that was on Disney Plus, which I think my subscription cancelled at the end of March, because we weren't watching anything actively on there. That one I'll have to, I'll subscribe again to that probably over the next few days. So I'm starting to get into that, turning them on and off again, but it does vary according to the service as to how easy that actually is.
It's almost like you just want to go back to having one service that gives you everything. Oh, hang on, wait on. That was Sky TV or TVNZ. Yeah, so it's an interesting one, isn't it? Just entertainment.
And I think the investors must have been looking at this with Netflix, because yes, we did have a huge drop in the share price from what was it, nearly $350 down to a little over $200, which is a massive
huge.
drop to happen, within a very short space of time. But it's worth, if you actually just roll back 6 months, that 300 and near $350 share price is half what it actually was last November.
Oh, really?
Right, so it was
it's
actually
come
up
back
at
already.
$700. So it had already gone in half, and then it's dropped again.
Yeah.
So there's some very interesting things, I think, going on from an investment perspective and some of these startups. Now, there's probably a whole lot more we could go into there around Netflix and these changes. I think right now, something we've discussed in the past. Let's support the local services we have, so they sort of are viable for as long as possible. Prefer our money to be going into supporting Kiwis and taxes into New Zealand and so on. But we are starting to see some trends where even those New Zealand broadcasters that have been they've been showing things on TV, they've been buying the rights for TV, and often the a level of streaming rights comes with it. I was talking to someone with one of the big broadcasters over the last few days about this, and the comment was, "Oh, we had XYZ program, but the rug's been pulled out from under us because one of the bigger global players has signed that, and they have control of it now. We're not even going to be able to broadcast it on air in New Zealand." So I'm not sure how that's going to play out, but certainly the landscape has really changed. I think will continue to change, and very, very hard to to probably win against some of these global firms. But what's happening with Netflix right now is a signal that the biggest players may not always be able to kind of predict it and get it right, even though they've got huge amounts of data. The other one was CNN, which of course has been available through Sky for a long time. They launched their on-demand service, certainly in the US, in April. CNN Plus, follow that sort of similar sort of naming. But then with the change of ownership, and they're now under the same ownership as Discovery that we have here in New Zealand. So Discovery, CNN, and is it Warner Brothers? That they're all under one entity now. So with that change, the streaming option for CNN is gone, and they just got a relatively sort of small number of subscribers, and it's gone. And the other piece with Netflix is they're talking about having a kind of a free ad supported variant. And now I've been wondering when our TVNZ on demand, etc., will go the other way and give you a paid version, so you don't have to listen. Watch the ads, and you can see how well the ad supported has worked for Spotify. So I wonder how that plays out for Netflix.
Well, the CNN one was interesting because it was announced it was launching. Then the Discovery moved to buy CNN, and there were rumours around that Discovery weren't keen to have that service go. So the writing was on the wall, but it was quite remarkable that as soon as they took control, it was like, well, that's it, we're shutting down. And I'd heard around the place that one of the things that led to its demise was it only had about 10,000 active users at any one particular time, which in the US for a streaming service is way too small. It was never going to get traction. So just fascinating that an on-demand news service has just been canned. So, and as you say, that's Discovery. So they're the owners of 3 and News Hub in New Zealand. So maybe we'll see more of that come through to here. It is. Again, coming back to what you said before, supporting New Zealand services and New Zealand content as well. And we're seeing that in Australia in particular. We're seeing big moves by the Australian government to try and get money off the big players to pay for services they're picking up in the country, recirculating, using it. And certainly some of the consumer advocacy groups over there are also advocating for similar advocacy around the use of service over demand and asking questions like, well, how are they encouraging Australians to watch Australian content, even if it's on the big players, So they're a lot more proactive and hands-on in Australia when it comes to regulation of these types of services, and often have been. We tend to be a little bit more hands-off until we think there's a real issue, and then we dive in and we really hit it hard. So, that might come here, but we can watch the Australians and see what they get up to.
Yeah, it's quite convenient having a connected country and economy that has so many similarities to ours, and they've got the scale, I guess you could say, to invest and to figure some of those things out where we don't necessarily always need to lead the way. I think there are times when it absolutely makes sense for us to do so. But I think it's been fascinating to watch things that they've been doing with the likes of Google and Facebook and various sort of regulatory pressures that are it's in some cases quite unique globally.
Yes,
and if those things work well, then we potentially jump on a similar bandwagon, or we take a slightly different approach.
Let's let them take the lead, take the heat, work it out,
Yeah.
and then we'll pick up behind them. And that's not a bad way to be a fast learner behind. So yeah.
Yep. Well, that's sort of been the case through COVID, hasn't it? Where New Zealand's been able to watch what's happened elsewhere in the world, and then make more informed decisions with a little bit more data because of that benefit of distance. Now, this big story, and can we trust Elon being the big question with. And this story's obviously moved around over the last few weeks, and there was this sort of poison pill from the board, and no, Elon's not going to be able to, it's not going to be practical for him to acquire. Then suddenly, he's clinched the deal. He's buying Twitter, 66 billion New Zealand dollars. I was curious, what sort of percentage is 66 billion of Elon's net worth?
Well, he's not buying it just with his own money.
That is true.
He did make a regulatory filing last week without announcing it on Twitter, which has been his downfall before if he's not careful, that he's been able to find funding. So he's doing it. He has the money under his own name. It's not all his own cash. But but 66 billion, I wouldn't think it was that much. I mean, he's doing incredibly well. Last week, Tesla filed their latest quarterly figures. They've paid off all their debt. They've paid down their debt. They made a profit. They are keeping up with demand. They actually produced more cars last quarter than they ever have before, even with all the supply chain issues that are occurring around the world because of the vertical integration they've got. So, they're doing pretty well. And so he's doing pretty well off that. He's signing contracts with SpaceX. So, so now here's his next thing he wants to get involved in. So this one, I think, has a lot more, not downside for him, but downside for everybody else, actually.
Yeah, and there was a commentary or an announcement that, and announcement when it comes to anything to do with Elon usually means a tweet or he said something somewhere, because they're generally no longer a PR department and they don't spend on advertising and so on, about the Boring Company that does the tunnels and a Hyperloop prototype coming. So there's a lot going on there. But I was curious, the 66 billion, how does it relate? Is he worth twice that, 3 times that, 4 times that? Anyway, did the calculation from US to what he's worth today, and I found a rather funny number for those who follow Elon: 420 billion. So 420
billion.
seems to be the number that Elon likes to include in things, which I thought was rather amusing. But drilling down. a little bit. I think there is a huge concern around, can Elon be trusted? As you say, there's going to be more than Elon involved, so it's not necessarily just that chunk of money, but it has all been able to pull together and happen very quickly. He has talked about sort of increasing the value of Twitter. How do you do that? Well, I mean, there are a whole raft of issues with Twitter today as I see them. There are concerns around bots, around users who aren't who they say they are, or they're not. They're not. They're just there to troll and so on one side. Elon's raised concerns around free speech, but how do you balance this stuff? Is it up to a private firm to draw those guidelines, or is that got to be managed sort of at a legislative level around the world? But one thing just sort of made me laugh this morning was he'd put out a particular tweet comment, and the first reply to it, as I saw it on my screen anyway, was a bot.
Yeah.
And the bot was had a blue tick, so it was considered a Twitter officially verified account, linked to Elliot James 87. Now, how this account got verified, who knows? But the name on it in weird characters was Elon Musk, and the profile picture was Elon Musk and was identical to his profile picture. Now, there are potentially some things here. When I look at that scenario, it's trying to scam people, trying to send them off to probably a scam crypto site, but likely seen by this tweet at the stage I looked at, it already had 85,000 likes, and Elon has a rather large following, so not a good situation.
No.
Not a good situation. But this has been going on for a very long time. Now, it doesn't just happen on Twitter. We see these sorts of things on YouTube with streams and comments and scams and so on as well. But if he can come in and maybe address some of these issues and get the other bits right, then we might well see the platform improve.
We might.
But on the flip side, if he stuffs it up, then you could see the whole thing tank, and everyone, or a large chunk of people, flee from Twitter.
Well, the thing about Twitter is it's not the biggest social platform. We know that, but it has influence that's way bigger than its size because of its use by media and politicians, right? So you've got that, and he's been pretty clear. I haven't read anywhere that he feels like he's coming in to make it work better. He does talk about it being not living up to expectations, but he very much couches that around freedom of speech. He's a total libertarian when it comes to freedom of speech. So the thought is that he's coming in to unleash the beast, as it were, and we might see Twitter. There was even comment that he might let Donald Trump back on, for example. Now, Donald's come out and said, no, I'm not going back to those guys. But you just don't know with Elon, And this is another example of where one person is ends up being control of a platform. And, I've heard over the weekend discussion about this around the use of the word oligarch, because, you get back to people like Rupert Murdoch, controlling the media empire that he does. You've got Mark Zuckerberg at Facebook. So you've got these individuals, high net worth individuals who, taking control of these platforms. And the risk with Twitter is that, he does unpick all the work that Twitter have been doing around hate speech online, the trolls, etc. So I'm probably sitting in the other side from you on this one. I think he's actually this could be quite a dangerous move for speech online, and he might find that it triggers regulation in the States.
Yeah,
Quite
look,
strong.
I don't think regulation is necessarily a bad thing. I think of our social networks should be there to do a public good, to serve the general population, something that helps and facilitates democracy. Now, for that to work, there is a level of accepting things from varying sides of the political spectrum, whether you do or don't agree with them. There does need to be a level of balance, and look, I don't know the best approaches for these things, but I would say that I think that we have to, or we don't have to, but my choice is to give Elon the benefit of the doubt at this point and to see how it plays out. Now, if he stuffs it up, he's just cost himself and whoever his partners are hot, billions and billions of dollars. If he does something that is, well thought out and well balanced and is good from a democratic perspective, and actually sort of lift some of the the negative aspects that we see on Twitter today in terms of trolling through these anonymous accounts, and that people actually need to go through some sort of verification to prove that they're a real person, and having an ability to basically filter and stop replies from anonymous accounts. There's probably a range of things there that could be done that may well lift the platform. Now, as you say, his political leaning is very different from the founders of Twitter, and probably from the large majority of the staff at Twitter. So there is the potential of a mass walkout, of losing lot of the expertise, a lot of what has made Twitter, the good parts of what Twitter has today. So it's really anybody's guess as to how it's going to play out. But I prefer to, rather than prejudge and say, look, he's going to completely screw it up. Look at the past, things he's been involved in, and he usually ends up with a reasonable level of innovation and and positive business sort of outcomes.
Shall we get back together in a year's time and talk about it? Because the other thing he could do is turn it into a subscription model and changes the whole dynamic once again.
Sure. And I think I'm possibly still, I can't remember whether I cancelled my Twitter. She may have done, because I didn't. I tweeted. I did a tweet. I don't tweet very often, to be fair, these days, but I do read Twitter, and I don't remember seeing the pop up that comes when you're on Twitter Blue, which is the kind of fake undo feature. It basically just holds your tweet back for 30 seconds unless you push tweet it now. Gives you a second chance to review what you've typed, but usually many of us still make mistakes in our tweets anyway. So definitely that could well be something to revisit again. I mean, I think what else can we do? We can sort of predict what he may or may not do, but he is a fairly unpredictable character.
Yep,
and
he is a man of his own, and he, you're absolutely right. He has been incredibly successful in what he's done. So he could really, I'll give you the benefit of the doubt and say he could really make a difference.
Yeah, and, I mean, he certainly can be a fairly divisive character. One of his tweets over the weekend was making fun of Bill Gates, and there was a whole text message chain that just happened to leak out and get tweeted by someone else, which he confirmed was legitimate. So he certainly has his rivals or his enemies or whatever you want to call them, and yeah, that stuff doesn't always play out very
No.
nicely. So, we've certainly seen examples of the I don't know, the comedic side of Elon Musk, and probably some some other sort of negative sides. I think other people probably say that he's just a downright dirty liar on some things and so on. But let's see how it plays out. Now, we did have a couple of other topics that we wanted to cover off. We've had this AX1 launch, which has returned to Earth, and this was the first what would you call it, a space mission to the International Space Station from US soil, and taking a bunch of people up to the ISS for I don't know, a scientific holiday. What would you call it?
They've been very clear they don't want to call it space tourism, because these people weren't tourists, they say. And it was a 17-day visit, I think it was.
Yeah.
So they did do a decent amount, but I'm not sure that the experiments they might have done on board were much more than look out the window and have a look and see what they could see. That might be a bit unkind, but that was one of the comments I saw around. But again, a great example of innovation and technology, private sector getting involved, and it was SpaceX. So Elon Musk again,
back in the news and back pocketing some money. Yeah, I mean, there's a whole lot we could delve into about the rights and wrongs of not space tourism, but we might leave that one for another day. Now, you pointed me at some discussion or a story online, Digital Trends, talking about mobile phones and their role within the war in Ukraine. And there has been so many interesting aspects of technology when it comes to this war. I find it fascinating. Some of it is certainly some of the tastes of things we get sort of a little bit sort of dystopian, like, well, where could all of this end up?
Yeah.
But a really interesting aspect that was in this coverage is how the Russians have really made a mess of their own communications to the level that I guess money that's supposed to go into them having their own great communications radios and so on hasn't really worked. And so you've got Russian soldiers using what I'm picking as the Ukrainian mobile network, and therefore text messages and calls in some cases are able to be monitored. Obviously, if those calls are happening over other secure platforms that operate on the mobile network, then not so much. But if it's unencrypted communications, then that opens up a fair bit to the Ukrainian intelligence, doesn't it?
Well, the thing that really fascinated me about this story was just around how a common everyday piece of consumer equipment is being used in so many different ways, and the one you're talking about in particular, and I've read some Western security analysts say they just can't believe how the Russian forces in particular are not using encrypted sources or encrypted services for communication around troop movement. And so you're right, you've got soldiers using unencrypted services asking where they should be, or who's here, or where's General such and such, and the Ukrainians going, oh, so that's where he is, right? Oh, well, that's where the next missile goes. So you've got that, but there's all sorts of ways they're using this. So
no Enigma machine needed there,
no Enigma machine needed, but other little things like when a Russian soldier is captured, Ukrainian soldiers immediately giving them a Ukrainian cell phone, say, ring your mum and tell her you're okay.
Mhm.
So basically, a little bit of propaganda going back to the homeland saying, I'm okay, but I've been captured. Don't believe the fact that it's going easily, sort of thing, So you've got that. Cameras on these cell phones. This is going to be the most well-recorded conflict in history, really, because it's the first instance where it's in a highly developed Western nation with full mobile coverage. And I suppose the thing that really ticks you over is it's that measure where there's more devices in the country than people. That gives you an indication of how well engrossed the devices are there. So, they're being used in so many different ways, in every way, shape, or form. And we carry it ourselves. So it's a great little story.
Yeah, and aspects like that, that a mobile network kind of knows where people are
They
based
do.
on the devices, and of course, that's intelligence that can be,
Well,
presuming you've locked it down well enough, that gives a reasonable amount of information back to the mobile networks and the Ukrainian government, and not the Russians. Again, as I say, it depends how well they've locked that down, but all manner of intelligence.
Well, I'm just saying, if this is Russian soldiers, their own phones,
Yeah.
I hope they've turned Google location off, because those are sort of things that you can find. Yeah, so just fascinating, a piece of consumer technology being used in so many different ways.
Mm. And of course, the mobile networks can basically tell where people are, certainly down to
They can.
a level of
Yep.
cell site and so
Yep,
on.
absolutely.
So, yeah, I think there will probably be a lot more that we'll hear about this. After things come to a conclusion, or we don't know when that's going to be, or certainly into the future, and we keep capturing more and more and learning more and more insights, the roles of drones and other technology. So, yeah, certainly like to see things wrap up, but that's just the nature
Yeah.
of these things. We don't really know exactly how it's going to play out, but I think technology has certainly played its part in helping protect Ukraine,
Sure
and
has.
has certainly stretched out the the war there. So we will see how that progresses, but yeah, hopefully technology has a positive ongoing impact there. Good. Well, I think we're probably pretty much out of time, Craig. Was there anything else you thought we should squeeze in before we finish up?
I don't think so. No,
Okay,
I think we've
okay.
covered the really meaty issues
Yeah.
as of today anyway, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, thank you so much, Craig. Great to catch up. Now, where can people find out about the events and the things that are
Yep.
going on with Two Ands?
Easiest thing to do is go to our website, twoands.org.nz. Everything links off there. I'm on Facebook as Two Ands CEO, LinkedIn under my own personal profile, Craig Young, but also Two Ands, and our Future Leaders program as well, flint.nz. So that's for anyone who's got a real passion for technology, no matter where it is, whether it's in HR, tech. If you don't have to be a coder or anything like that, you might just want to see it being applied in any part of the way you work or live.
Brilliant.
And we're helping those people, develop their skills and help, because we want New Zealand to be world leading across the board, right?
Absolutely.
So you've got to help develop and generate your next generation of leaders as they come through. And I think, as with the move to Orange, we're feeling quietly confident that we're going to be able to get back to actually having things in person, because technology is brilliant. Zoom and Teams have been amazing, but I think we're all getting a little bit tired, and we want to get back to and actually start talking to people and interacting, at that social level to build those relationships. Yep.
Certainly those of us that are a little bit older are more used to in person
Yeah.
like to. It seemed to. It varies, right, across individuals. It's not just age groups
No,
and
that's
so
right.
on, but it has been interesting. For those of us that have done surveys across our organisations and seeing the different preferences. But I think there is it's generally pretty positive, this opportunity to start getting back to face to face, as long as we can stay reasonably safe. But those numbers are kind of continuing to trend down, which is encouraging. All right, well, thanks everyone for joining us here on the New Zealand Tech Podcast. We'll catch you again next week, and again a big thank you to our show partners, Vocus, Vodafone, Spark, HP, and Gorilla Technology. And thanks again, Craig.
My pleasure. Thanks, Paul.
Cheers.
The New Zealand Tech Podcast, brought to you by Gorilla Technology, proactive and strategic IT.